You're listening to episode number 21 of the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. And in this episode, I'm going to discuss eliminating fear from a higher perspective. Before I've talked about fear and I've talked about it being unconscious and brain-based, but in this episode, I want to talk to you about eliminating it from a higher perspective and a higher awareness of your being. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. So, a question for you. What is fear? And as you're thinking about that question, let me give you the definition of fear. Fear is an emotional response to a perceived threat. But I have a bigger question for you, and that question is this. It's an emotional response to a perceived threat, but the question for you is threat to what? For 99% of people, it's a threat to some aspect of their well-being. And it can be any aspect of what I call their external world, meaning their physical life, the world around them. It can be fear of something happening to their body, their mind, their possessions, or something even happening in their environment. So this being said, let me ask you, what fear comes up in your life? The more you think about the fear, whatever fear it might be, and pretty much many fears are perceived fears and not actually real fears. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But the more that you think about a fear, the stronger the fear grows. A great example of that would be, let's say that you're at home on Saturday night. You're sitting in the living room and it's dark out back and you hear what you think are footsteps on the back porch. And for most people, what they do is that's a perceived threat. What most people do is they go into fear. And the more they think about the footsteps on the back porch, and by the way, I want a caveat here. I'm not telling you to ignore anything that could be a possible real threat. I want to make that very clear. But notice the more that you think about the person on the back porch, the more fearful that you become. Why? Because when you think about fear, fear expands. I also want to point out about perceived threats, because many things that we fear really aren't things that are fearful to us at all. They're things that we just perceive to be fearful. But I do want to point out there are real, fears that are relative to survival. If somebody actually pulls a gun on you, that's a very real threat. However, your level of fear is going to be based upon something we're going to talk about a little bit later in this podcast. The survival part of you, the fight or flight, part of you is going to respond right away and you're going to get into fear. But I want to talk about a bigger part of you in just a moment. Let's say that you're hiking and you get too close to the edge of the cliff. For many people, that brings up a lot of fear. What I want to do in our time together today is I want to go beyond what we perceive to be ordinary human fears. And I want to state again is that I'm not advocating that you engage in any kind of dangerous behavior whatsoever. I just want to talk about fear from a higher perspective. And a real life example of that, I do not remember the name of the movie that I watched. It was a kind of a docu-movie a couple of months ago, and it's about a guy who, I don't know what the right word is. Basically, he had no harnesses, no safety, anything, and he scaled the side of El Capitan in Yosemite. I believe it's like 3,000 feet straight up. One fall, boom, splat, you're dead. And he did it with no safety apparatuses whatsoever. And as I was watching that, I thought to myself, because they had mentioned, we're going to do, basically the part of the documentary, is they wanted to do a brain scan to look at his brain. And my first thought was, is that his amygdala, which is a part of the brain responsible for fear, his amygdala is not working properly. I cannot talk today, but basically, I was thinking his amygdala is not working properly. And doing an MRI and a brain scan, that's what they found, is that his amygdala was smaller, I believe, than most people's amygdalas. Therefore, he didn't experience fear like a lot of people. So, or most all of us. I mean, there's no way that I'm going to scale El Capitan, even with ropes. But my bigger point is when I'm talking about transcending fear, I am in no way whatsoever advocating that you do anything to test fear. I'm just giving you this for higher perspective and actually, hopefully, for more peace of mind in life for the little bitty fears that people get into that are completely ridiculous fears about what people are going to think about them, or people are going to judge them, or are they going to look good somewhere or look bad somewhere or whatever. So that's my intention in this podcast. So I've said it in a couple of different ways, and that is my disclaimer. I did a recent episode here on attachment. And I said that the cause of all suffering is attachment. And if you look at your own life, and I've observed over the years, is that many people get into their fear out of a thought about losing something. People will think, I'm going to lose money. I'm going to lose things. I'm going to lose a job. I'm going to lose people in my life by moving away or by death, or I'm going to actually lose health, or someone in my family is going to lose health. If you notice, pretty much any time that you think about something regarding loss, you get into fear. I also want to point out, and I've researched this before, and I don't remember whether I found corroborating evidence, but it makes a lot of sense, that we are only born of two fears, and that is the fear of falling and the fear of loud noise. All other fears are learned. So I'm going to just leave that where it is for right now. I also recently did an episode on Dreamtime. Hopefully you've listened to that, and if you haven't, make sure you do, because Dreamtime is the most powerful state that you have. And I even mentioned in that episode that I use Dreamtime, and the messages that I get in Dreamtime are more real to me than even my conscious analytical prefrontal cortex thinking. And I'm very adept at remembering dreams. And I had a dream a couple of months ago, and it's a very powerful dream. And in this dream, I know that I mentioned a lot, and if you don't like it, well, then don't listen to the podcast. But my brother-in-law, my mentor, is a shaman. And in this dream, he was talking to me. And he said to me, he says, you need to let go of all attachment in your life. Now, for the most part, I thought that I had let go of, all attachment, even though I've got I've got a Porsche and all that. And it's just a hunk of metal. A couple of homes, you know what? They're just homes and things. They're just things. I'm not attached to things. What I didn't recognize until I had this dream is he says that you need to let go of your attachment even to your own life. And when I really thought about that, I was like, how much stuff in my own life do I attach to? Now, I am personally not afraid of what people call air quote death. As a matter of fact, there's some part of me that obviously I want to, well, not obviously to you, but obviously I want to stay on the planet as long as I can to do the work that I do. But I have no problem if I was told tomorrow I've got to check out at noon and I've got, I leave the body. That's what it is. But you know what? I didn't recognize, even though I don't have an attachment to leaving the planet, I didn't recognize that I attached to certain things in my daily life. And what people attach to is for example, you see this all the time, and I can't say that I'm not guilty of it. Men attach to they're losing their hair, and they get attached to that. They get, attached to how they feel and things that are happening in their body, and people get attached to all these things. And I'm not saying that you don't always want to feel well and to feel good and be in great health. What I'm simply saying is that when you detach even to your own life and you let your life unfold, that's when the fear stops and that's when the magic happens for a lot of people. And at the very least, what happens is peace of mind. I also want to share an interesting way to look at this is that when you get into fear, what most people do is they hold on to fear. I can't tell you the amount of people that I've seen over the years that get into a particular fear about, oh, I'm gonna see my father-in-law or my mother-in-law, or my kids are gonna do this or my kids are gonna do that. And I see people live, year after year after year in fear. But a way that I want you to look at this is that fear is a parasite that robs you. And when you get into fear, you're being robbed by these parasites. And I also want to point out there's a concept called causal potency. And causal potency, I believe I'm correct here. A guy named Roger Sperry won the Nobel Prize in 1976 or so for a concept that's called causal potency. How that applies to the brain is that the more you think about something, the more that you think about something. And if you look at your own life, the angrier you become, the angrier you become. Meaning the more you think about it, the angrier you become, or the word mad. The more you think about being mad, the madder you become. So when you stay in the fear, what you're doing is you're expanding the parasites of the mind, and you're also actually feeding the parasite of fear. So just ponder that for a bit. Also, a little commercial for myself here. If you would, share this episode with your friends and family. And the reason why is because the world is consumed. The world is consumed with fear. You see it in the media, and part of it's actually brain-based. That's why, have you ever noticed before that news headlines they're never about the Boy Scout helping the old lady across the street. They're about some, bus plunging off a cliff or an airplane crashing or something like that. These are all fear-based things. And I want you to recognize that. And that actually activates the brain the reptilian part of the brain to pay attention. And that's why news uses negative headlines, because it sells. But the world is full of fear in so many ways. Even the last presidential election, if you look at the marketing platform, is fear-based. And I'm going to leave that. I'm not even going to touch that, but it's all fear-based, and fear is what drives people. So if this episode can help you and other people let go of the fear, then you know what? I've done my job with this episode. So if you find value here, then please share with your friends and family. Okay, let's talk about separating you from the fear. You probably have heard the old phrase before, and it's said in various ways, but you might have heard somebody say before that we're not human beings having a human experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And you may or may not have heard me say before is many people turn spirituality into dogma. Even though they think that it's not dogma, they turn it into dogma. A place that I'd request that you at least consider is that you are a cosmic being having a human experience. And I talked about that in an earlier podcast. What I mean by that is, and I'll demonstrate some physics here in just a moment, what I mean by that is that you were somewhere before you got to this planet. You were literally, you are a life force in your body, but where did that life force come from before you got here? You were somewhere. Now, where I'm going to go with this is earlier when I said there's no such thing as death, that is physics. Albert Einstein discovered and postulated or put out what he calls the law of the conservation of energy and the law of the conservation of matter. Basically, what that means is that energy and matter cannot be destroyed. They only change form, and the amount of energy in the universe remains constant. Let me give you a really simple example of this. Let's say, for example, that you have a glass of ice water, and you take your ice cubes, which are I'm going to use the word solid, but they're solid. And you put them in water, which water has a certain degree of solidness. And by the way, I'm not a chemist, so I'm not qualified to talk about the levels of solidity and all this and gaseous and all this kind of stuff. But what Einstein said is that matter actually can never be destroyed and energy can never be destroyed. They simply change form. Now, let me give you an example of that. Let's say, for example, that you have an acorn in your pocket and you walk out into an empty pasture and you actually drop the acorn and that acorn grows into an oak tree. So guess what? That oak tree came from nowhere, but it came from the acorn that you have in your pocket. Now what happens is you're tired of the oak tree so that you cut it down and you burn it. And what happens is what was physical matter now turns into energy, which is heat. Yet the constant supply of energy, the supply of energy in the universe remains constant. Now let's apply this to you. You are physics. You are electrons, you are neutrons, and you are protons. You've got carbon in your body. So what happens, you being electrons and neutrons and protons, guess what? You cannot die, because what happens is when the consciousness, your consciousness and your soul leave the body returns back to nothingness again, yet the constant actually amount of energy in the universe stays the same. You can not die. Physics proves that. So next where I want to go is that death is an illusion. Very few people can say they've ever heard me say, "Oh, somebody died." And the reason I never say somebody died is because no one dies. What people do hear me say is that someone passed over, and they transitioned over. What I simply mean is they've transitioned over to a different energy, different vibration, and to a different dimension. So all of this being said, what I want you to get, I'm going to slow down here, is that you and your life is a continuum. Now, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter what I believe, and I've talked about beliefs in other episodes. It doesn't matter what you believe. Let's just look at physics, and let's look at really what makes sense, is that you actually come from somewhere into a body, you leave the body, and you go somewhere. Where you go is, for many people, based upon a religion. Many people think they're going to go to heaven, or this place or that place. But the reality and the truth is that you were somewhere before you got here and you're somewhere after you leave, which demonstrates that life is a continuum. Now, here's a big takeaway for you. When you accept that your life is a continuum, there's no purpose for fear. You see, because the fear that you hold and your life, think about them, all pertain to this life, this little bitty short span of you being on the planet. And when I talk about people being on the planet for a very short amount of time, if you were to imagine a bolt of lightning in your life, one bolt of lightning in the course of your entire life, how long was that? Literally, I don't know, a tenth of a second? Well, in the course of your totality as a being, your life literally here on this planet is like 1/10 of a second. So what's the point of wasting your entire lifetime here in fear? And many people spend an entire lifetime trapped in fear for a lifetime that's metaphorically 1/10 of a second. So like I said, when you accept that you are an infinite cosmic being, the fear that you have on this planet doesn't play the same role. I'll give you a very personal example is I always wanted kids when I was younger, and I don't have any kids this lifetime. Notice even how I say it, I don't have kids this lifetime. And what a lot of people get into, which I do not, is, oh my gosh, I don't have any kids, and who's going to take care of me when I'm old, and all this kind of stuff. Those are things that never enter my mind, because the place that I work from is, you know what? There will be other lifetimes and other times that I can have kids. It just doesn't happen to be so for me in this lifetime. So where I work from is that I'm on a continuum. And I'm in this lifetime and I'm going to pass through it. And then wherever I go, something different's going to happen. Many, many years ago, completely off topic, but I used to work at the Carter Presidential Center in Atlanta, Georgia. And I used to work in the executive offices. It's a nonpartisan, actually, establishment. And a couple of years ago, Jimmy Carter he had brain cancer, I believe it was, or a brain tumor. And I just saw a snippet on TV where he says, you know what, I've had a really good life. He goes something along the lines of, I've had an adventurous life and I'm kind of ready for my next adventure. And then he said, well, you know what, my wife isn't so fond of that thought process, but I'm ready for something else. And that's where I work from, is that anytime it's my time to leave the planet, it's my time to leave. But you know what? What's the point of wasting my days and weeks and months and years in fear when I'm going to leave the planet anyway? You know, Gandhi, let's talk about heaven for a second, just as an example, is Gandhi had said there is no religion in heaven. You know what people have never heard anybody talk about, and even when I was a kid and I'd go to church, is I never heard anybody ever talking about there being fear in heaven. As a matter of fact, heaven's supposed to be all rosy, right? I mean, that's your goal, to go to heaven, and then you get air quote eternal life. But I've never heard anyone say, you know what, you get eternal life, but you know what, there's a lot of things to fear in that eternal life. So you never hear about fear in air quote heaven. What I'm telling you is that fear is not a natural part of your higher being. Fear is not soulful. Fear is your 3D body, meaning that bag of skin that you walk around in your ego. Fear are things that only apply to very finite thinking about the totality of your being. Okay, so let me give you an example here, and I want you to look at your lifetime. Let's say, for example, that you want to move to a new city. Wherever you are, you want to move across the country, maybe a new place, even the same city. I don't care. I'm using an example here. But what fears do you get into if you want to move across the country or change jobs or even getting married or whatever? People get into fears like, well, am I going to be happy in this marriage? Or what if I move and I have bad neighbors? Or what if I move and there's really bad traffic? Or what if I move and there's crime nearby? Or what if I move and it's a longer commute to work? And people get into all these fears. That's human. But what I want you to look at is the example that I gave you earlier about heaven. Are you worried about what's going to happen in heaven, so to speak? Are you worried that, you know what, you're going to get some bad harp and it's not going to play? Are you worried that you're going to actually get a lumpy cloud to sleep on and you're going to be uncomfortable sleeping in heaven? Are you worried that you're going to miss cheeseburgers? Are you afraid that you're not going to have cheeseburgers and pizza in heaven? Absolutely not. So the takeaway here for you is that all the fear that you get into, and this might be a stretch for a lot of people, but you're just passing through this lifetime and you are here for the literal, a literal blink of the eye. You're just passing through. You're not going to be here that long. Even if you're here 100 years, you're not going to be here that long. So why not just enjoy your life? And then, get out of the fear because it serves no purpose other than to paralyze you. As a matter of fact, I want to read something to you that I've had for a lot of years. And actually, I wrote on it the year 2000. And it's just a little passage here. And here's the passage. It says that when I look, I find there is no more dreadful disease than fear. What else is there in life to be feared more than fear itself? Fear paralyzes the very being of a person. Fear destroys the whole capacity for rebellion. Fear makes any change impossible. Fear binds one to the known, and the journey to the unknown is completely stopped. And although whatever is worth knowing and achieving in life is all found in the unknown. That being said, how much has your fear trapped you from exploring and from going outside your comfort zones and from truly, truly living your life because you're trapped in the fear in this tiny little actually epoch of time, which is that you're on the planet, which is literally nothing. Okay, so letting go of fear. Letting go of fear requires that you trust. And you know what? I'm really suggesting that you start thinking about it in the way that I'm sharing with you here, that you're not here that long. I mean, it's just a lightning strike. And fear is not natural to your soul or to your higher self. And just try that on and see how it fits. Because guess what? If you don't like it, you can always go back to the old fearful way, then live your life in fear. And that's fine. And that is your choice. But right now, I want you to get that letting go of fear requires trust. And it also requires letting go of living like from the lower aspect of life. You might have seen, well, we've all seen before. It's people call it the Star of David. It's called multiple things. But basically, the meaning behind it is as above, so below, and so below, as above. And the way that I want to share that with you here is that you are here on this planet so below, but you're also in your body as a cosmic being from above. So live from the knowing that, you know what, you're not going to be on this planet for eons, at least in this incarnation, at least in this bag of skin that you're walking around in. And I don't know if I can say it any more clearly than what I did a little earlier, is that you truly are a cosmic being. Literally, if you're not on this planet, even though this planet is part of the cosmos, but you know what? If you're not on this planet, you are somewhere. You come, you incarnate, you live the experience, and you leave, and then you can come back again. I'm not going to go into that here because some people are going to get freaked out with that and everything else. But truly, just ponder that. Get out of your old beliefs, which I even talked about in the previous podcast. Get out of your old beliefs about what the world is and is not, and operate from, I am a cosmic being. And then another question that I would have for you, when you adopt that, what becomes possible for you? Let me share a couple of additional thoughts with you that will, even if you just want to stay very pragmatic and you want to be what I call 3D and you want to operate from the Susan Smith identity and the ego and all that, that's fine. But let me give you something as a result of this particular episode that will make your life a lot easier. And when you really explore what I'm going to give you, you will find it to be true. When you accept it as truth, and you live from this place, oh my gosh, it'll make your life so much easier. What I want to share with you is this, is no matter what has happened in anyone's life, from the beginning of time until now, no matter what has happened in anyone's life and even your own life, is that life always works out. It might not work out in the way that you actually have an attachment to when you expect it to work out, but in the end, life always works out. I want to give you an example of that. Many years ago when I lived in New York City, one of my students was a very, very wealthy oil man, probably worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And he said that he wanted to invest in a business venture with me. And what I did is I brought on a couple of business partners for what I wanted to do. And what happened is one of the business partners started muddying the water and convoluting things very, very quickly. It got so bad, and it got to the point to where this business deal that I was going to do, and I was obviously the lead person in this relationship, meaning on the borrowing side, the borrower side of the relationship. But we had come to a $3 million deal with this oil man who wanted to invest in me and a business. And one of the business partners started convoluting things, and I started getting into fear. And I called my brother-in-law and started talking to him about it. And he went through a Socratic method, and he said, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I said, well, the whole business thing could go sideways, and then I'm on the hook for $3 million. And then he said, then what? And I said, well, then you know what? I don't have $3 million. I'm going to go bankrupt. And then what? Well, I'm not going to have any money. I'm going to have bad credit. And then what? And he took me through a Socratic method. And then he says, you know what? End of the day, you can kick the bucket, and that's a great thing too, because it doesn't matter at that point. So really, what does all this matter to you? Why are you getting so wound up about it? And I recognized I was getting wound up about it because of all the fear that I was in. And actually, I think he used the word die, and I'm just using that colloquially. He's like, then you can die. And he's like, that's a great thing too. And then I recognized that all this fear that I was in is because I was thinking that things in my life were not going to be all right and things were not going to be okay. So, no matter where you are in your personal evolution listening to this right now, here is your transformational takeaway. Are you ready? Life always has been, is now, and will always be okay. There are a couple of ways you can say that. Everything always has been fine, things are fine now, and things will always be fine. But just like the example I gave you in New York City, that's 20 years later. Things are fine now, things were fine then, but people get into all the fear in the moment when things are going to be fine. So your takeaway is that your life always has been, is now, no matter where you are, and will always be fine. Why? Because you are a cosmic being. Okay, so the next podcast episode is a Q&A, and I'm going to answer Steve's question. And Steve's question is, would you say it's best to look at things as they are now or how you want them to be? Well, I'm going to answer that in two different ways about actually looking at things as they are and how we want them to be. Because for most people, and probably you as well, what creates unhappiness in your life is when you do not accept life for what it is in the moment and you're wanting it to be something else. That's what I call a story in the space between where you are and where you think life should be. And for many people, that space is a lot of unhappiness. So if you're telling yourself stories, which I bet you are, that are creating unhappiness in your life, then make sure you listen to the next episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you later. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. You know, if you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.